I'm Ariel Azor, host of Right This Way, and today we're going to talk about why abortion isn't a political issue, or at least shouldn't be. So this week, for the third time, 3 years in a row, this bill has been proposed. Democrats voted to block the Born Alive Abortion Survivors Bill. Democrats have voted to block it every single time, and now you're saying you just told us this isn't a political issue. Why are you talking about Democrats versus Republicans? We'll get to it. Republicans voted unanimously in favor of this bill, and actually two Democrats from Pennsylvania and West Virginia voted also in favor of it. But the rest of the Democrats said no, they shot it down, again, third year in a row. So they're not letting this pass, and they're citing reasons like saying it just is a redundant law. You know, it's not necessary. We already have things in place that do the same thing. And that's really the only reasoning they're citing, because you can't really reason with why you would not want to support such a thing. So what does this bill do? What is the purpose of it? Does it already exist? Is there already something of the sort? Obviously, it's illegal to kill a baby, murder, infanticide, whatever it may be. It's not legal in that sense. But abortion is legal, and many people would argue that abortion is the same thing as killing a baby, right? I would argue that any day, but today we will not, for the sake of time on this podcast. We'll try to keep it relatively short. But what this bill specifically is meant to do is to protect babies who are survivors of abortion. So basically what happens with a late-term abortion is the way that they have to sort of deliver the baby. It's a horrible, horrible thing, but some of them actually go through this, what I think you could say, torture, and survive it. And they're actually born. That's why the bill is Born Alive Abortion Survivors. So it's different from what laws we might have against, killing a child, or like just because you wanted an abortion and didn't get one doesn't mean, you can just kill the child. Of course, that is illegal. But in this case, what happens is this was supposed to be an abortion. This doctor is an abortionist. They're not there really to provide medical care, and especially not to babies. They're there to kill them. So, the very nature of it is it's like a horrible thing, but babies are born alive every year. According to the CDC, between 2003 and 2014, 143 babies were born alive. So, when you do the math, that's roughly one baby a month, which I know people like to say, this is very rare. It is very rare. But we're talking about a child and the legality of that child's death, leading to their death simply because a mother didn't want it. And, one of the biggest cases that people make for abortion on a supposedly moral standpoint is that, it's my body, it's my choice. And this is what you hear the left say all the time, because it's the only argument they have to make. They have absolutely nothing else to say, because there is no good moral argument. Why would you be okay with taking a life? And so they try to say, it isn't that. And we used to, listen to the science. And now 99% of biologists are in agreement that life begins at conception. So that's why the left has shifted from, because I remember just, a couple years ago, the left's leaning on this was, no, that's not a baby until it's breathing, then it's alive. It can, all of these things feel pain and stuff. And now we've learned that a baby can feel pain at a very early stage, and all of these different things just leading up to biologists, actual scientists who work in this field for a living saying, yeah, life begins at conception. So now we have turned away from the moral high ground, right? Because that was what it originally was this isn't a life, according to the left. So it's okay because it possibly negatively affects the other life that is intertwined with it, right? The mother. And so from a moral standpoint, we should care for the mother because, she needs whatever she needs. And if that means to terminate her pregnancy, then that's what that means. That's best for her. And now we've turned away from that because there's no argument to be made, right? So it's just this very angry, my body, my choice, my body, my choice. And you just hear this constantly. And it is the only argument people make nowadays because it's the only one they can. And I think that the people that are actually in favor of abortion is so small. I think people are, one, afraid to say that they're not in favor of abortion. You know, like, I think the majority of people, if you ask them that are not like Christians, Catholic, whatever, religious people, would say, I don't personally agree with abortion, but I think other people should be able to make that decision for themselves because it's their body, right? So it's the same argument. And just because you know it is wrong, you know that, because how can any human being look at ultrasound photos, 3D ultrasound photos, anything of the sort, and not think that that is a human being that deserves a life? But the left doesn't. And this is where I'm going with this not being a political issue. These babies are already born. I'm not saying ban all abortion. I'm very in favor of that, actually, but that's not what I'm saying here. This bill, watch what is happening. These are the people that we're voting into office. If you consider yourself at all religious, if you ever go to church, you cannot possibly think that this is okay. You cannot possibly think that killing a child who is born, this is what I'm saying here, is what happens is these doctors, these abortionists, because again, I don't believe they're really real doctors. They're not there. Like, doctors take an oath to, like, not harm people, to only like do things to help them. And that gets into a big ethical debate with euthanasia and things like that. And I think this falls somewhere along those categories, because even if we legally accept abortion, how can you possibly say that a child who survives that abortion, who is basically injured, needs care, they are born alive, they become a patient basically, and what happens is that these babies are left to die. Sometimes it takes up to 24 hours for them to die after they are born alive, injured from a botched abortion. How sick is that? How messed up? Why has this become a political issue? Here's the thing, is it's not. Like I said, so many Democrats, left, right, no matter what side you're on, if you are at all religious or even have any kind of moral standpoint on the life of human beings, the right to life, you cannot possibly accept this. But again, people don't pay attention, because even people on the left and even people on the right who say, I'm not personally in favor of abortion, but I think other people should have the right to choose. This isn't about choosing. Why should a mother get to choose whether or not her child lives? How is that any different from a mother coming home from work to see that her child has drawn with crayons on the wall and deciding, yeah, my child no longer has the right to live. I don't want him anymore. It sounds ridiculous, but how is it any different? That is a baby. That is a human being's life. And I mean, again, we're not going into the abortion debate. It cannot be debated whether or not that baby is alive. You tried to terminate the pregnancy, failed, and this baby is a survivor, and this baby deserves care. He deserves the basic right to life that every single human being supposedly has. This is a moral issue. But if we don't stand up for it politically, it's not going to change. This very simple bill here only meant to protect babies. Let me be clear on what it does. It forces doctors to care for a baby that is born alive after an attempted abortion, for a baby that survives that. And if they don't, they're at risk of prosecution. It even has protections for a mother. She can't be prosecuted for whatever happens. So again, you can research it, look into it. I cannot see one single reason we would not be in favor of passing that bill. And citing redundancy, saying that it already happens, when you know for a fact that it obviously is not enough. It's one thing, and still terrible and still not right, that we're not standing up enough for, for children that haven't been born, but not standing up, not being in favor of protecting, of caring for a child that is injured, a survivor. It's so terrible that we even have to talk about this. Watch what you are voting for, because I do not believe for 1 second that 50% of Americans do not support this bill. 100% of Americans should support this bill. The very small percentage that do not support this should be whatever percentage we have of sociopaths and people who do not feel empathy. Because other than that, you cannot possibly believe that a baby should be left to die. Protected by the law, because that's what we're saying here is it's protected by the law. I had this one professor last year, and it was an argument in research class. I've probably talked about her before because I've never had someone that was so contradictory, so hypocritical. And the entire class, right, is how to make a good argument, how to basically do what I'm doing, how to write a persuasive paper and things like that. And so we were writing a paper and the professor, is talking to us and she's saying, you guys don't know anything. Basically, Kamala would agree with her. We're just children. What do we know? And in the very same sentence, she said that we had to cite our sources because we didn't know anything. So we're basically only using sources. Don't put anything of like your own opinion in here. Just cite other people's opinions, which I think is counterintuitive for the purpose of thinking for yourself, right? But in the very same sentence, she said, here's a good source I'll show you. And she pulls up Greta Thunberg. And I kind of honestly started laughing for a second because I was like, this is a joke, right? And then she proceeds the lesson like she's completely serious. And she was completely serious, I later realized, because she went on to say, Greta can be trusted because she's an activist. You guys, as people who are literally in college and 7 years older than this girl, have completed 7 more years of schooling, are not a good source, but she is a source simply because she calls herself an activist. She dropped out of school. She's never been to college. I mean, how could she be an activist who is a citable source in a college paper, right? It doesn't make any sense. Again, in that same lesson, she went on to say that there is an argument too strong. And I was like, well, what? What are we doing here? I think she's joking again. And of course she wasn't. And, she said there was this story. My husband and I we were driving through DC and we saw all these anti-abortion people. And she even called them that. And she said that these anti-abortionists were standing on the street and they had signs and stuff. And this one sign was just so terrible. It was and she didn't word it this way, but it was the reality of abortion. It was what her words were, I think, were this is what happened in abortion. It depicted a very graphic abortion. And I wanted to say to her, it's all graphic. It's all terrible. And I wish I had said something to her. This is a professor teaching the entire class that an argument can be too strong. And she's literally using abortion as an example. She was saying it was so strong of an argument. It was so good of an argument, which, wasn't the wording she used, that it got to her. And again, that wasn't at all the wording she used. She said it made me turn away. I couldn't look at it. You couldn't look at the reality of what you were facing, of what you support, right? There's no such thing as an argument that's too strong. And I know you're saying, how can you know more than a college professor? I'm certain I don't know more about English or arguments than a college professor at any college. But I know more about common sense, apparently, than she does. I know more about empathy, apparently, than she does. Because when you see something and it makes you change your mind, it isn't too strong of an argument. When you see something that gets to you, that makes you feel something, it's not too strong of an argument. It's a perfect argument. Because knowing that sort of thing, seeing that sort of thing, being witness to it, you cannot possibly support it because the only way to believe in this is to be very ignorant of it. And there's a lot of people that are very ignorant, but we need to change that. Again, no matter what side you are politically, this is something that we absolutely can all come together on, and we can talk about more specifically abortion another day. I try to do news topics. This is something very specific. This is something the 3rd year in a row. How is this not passing? It's not passing because no Democrats are voting for it. How has this become a political issue when this is a moral societal problem? When I was walking out of class that day, I heard 2 girls that were also in that class talking to each other. And as I walked past them, I could hear them saying, I can't believe she said that. I can't believe she used abortion as an example in that way. She literally proved her own point wrong and basically voicing everything that I had been thinking as I sat there silently and as they sat there silently and as probably the other 15 people or, at least 10 of them sat there silently. What we do about it can be nothing or everything to those babies, to those survivors that are going to live their life now because somebody protected them. Because somebody said what we're all thinking. If you've enjoyed this episode, you can give me a thumbs up on YouTube. You can leave a review on Apple Podcasts. And you can also check out my Instagram at right.this.way.